All meetings in order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Hi, President Dom,
Here.
Vice President Everard,
Here.
Treasurer Gaten,
Here.
Secretary Thomas, I'm sorry, Secretary Fritz,
Here.
and Trustee Thomas is absent, Trustee Zimmerman,
Present.
and Trustee Resort.
Here. Okay. Okay, we'll go on to public comments. Number one. Anybody out there?
There's not.
Anybody in the audience? All right. Guess we'll go ahead and move to the presentation. Do the classification and compensation study presentation.
I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna get, Rachel on. Rachel, I made you a call, so you can begin. Let me introduce, and then, Andy is on, and Jenny Hyde, is on as well. And, we are glad to have GovHR with us this evening, that they will present the draft final report, that is being presented this evening to you. And, everybody received, it was and this week, and then you have a hard copy as well in front of you this evening. So if that's helpful, and then Rachel will be able to answer any questions that you may have, or Jenny, Andy, or I.
Great,
Right.
thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Can everybody hear Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize in advance. The Wi-Fi at my house is out, so I'm using my hotspot. I hope it all works okay, but please stop me at any time if you have any trouble hearing me as I go through this. I might just turn my video off too, just so I don't have any issues. But again, please stop me if you have any problems hearing me. Really quickly, I'll just introduce myself and then I'll dive into the presentation. The presentation is rather short, but we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards, and you can definitely stop me as I'm going through it too if you have questions. My name is Rachel Skaggs. I am a Senior Vice President in Classification and Compensation Project Manager with GovHR. I've been with GovHR for almost 4 years now, and prior to working with GovHR, I spent 10 years in local government management, most recently as the city manager in Princeton, Illinois, but prior to that worked for the village of Schaumburg and the village of Montgomery. So it's been great working on this classification and compensation study. I appreciate all the work that Jenny, Andy, and Elizabeth have done on this to get it to the point we're at right now. So kind of an outline of what I'll discuss. I'm going to go over the scope of work that we were doing, and then that'll lead into the job evaluation and the proposed classification plan, which really focuses on the internal equity of the organization. And then I'll talk about the compensation plan and the compensation survey and the proposed compensation plan, which really focuses on the external equity. And then I'll share with you some recommendations on implementation of the plan, as well as future administration of the plan. And then, like I said previously, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So the scope of work of this project included kind of two components, a job evaluation analysis and a compensation analysis. As part of the job evaluation analysis, we had a study preparation meeting and a project kickoff meeting. We distributed materials, an employee letter to employees that explained the process, and held an employee meeting. After that, we did a job evaluation analysis, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit, and that really established the job classification system. The external component is a compensation analysis. One of the first things that we did to determine that was determine a group of comparable entities rather, and then sent them a salary survey and analyzed all of that salary data that we received. Then what you're seeing tonight and what we're presenting is the draft report, and we're making a presentation on that. after which we'll finalize everything. So the job evaluation process really looked at 55 positions. So there were 55 positions within the conservation district that were analyzed using the following 9 job factors. And this is what establishes that internal equity. So we looked at education, the required preparation and training needed to do the job, work experience, the years of experience needed, decision-making and independent judgment, responsibility for policy development, but also implementation and interpretation of policy, planning of work, both planning your own work and the work of others, contact with people inside the organization as well as external contacts with different groups and entities or governmental bodies, contractors, vendors, things like that. Work of others or supervision exercise, working conditions, so exposure to physical demands and hazardous conditions, and then use of technology or specialized equipment. So each position filled out, or each employee filled out a job analysis questionnaire, which focused on those 9 job factors. After that, they submitted those to their supervisors and department heads. All of that information came back to GovHR, and then we held a virtual interview with at least one employee in each position to really get a better understanding of what that position is responsible for and what their duties are. And that's what then led to the classification plan. So each position was given a job factor analysis score, and the classification plan was developed based on internal equity, meaning how positions relate to one another at the conservation district. And you'll see in table 1 within the draft report, and we can go to that in a little bit, but you'll see the classification plan, which shows every position that we evaluated, and every position is within one of those 12 grades. The next component was the external market piece. So one of the first things that we did is establish comparable entities. So entities that are similar to the conservation district. We looked at these 6 criteria: equalized assessed valuation, per capita income, number of full-time employees, total wages paid, total expenditures, and general fund property tax revenue. And what we do is we look at the number for McHenry County Conservation District for each of those, and the closer an entity is to matching yours, the more points they would receive. The farther away they are, the less points they would receive. Thus, an entity that receives the most points is then the most comparable based on these 6 criteria. So that's how we determined this group of comparable entities, ones that received 60 or more points. And then you'll see a list here too that shows, some of them have an asterisk next to them, and those are the communities that responded to the survey or sent us their compensation plan. So overall, one thing to note is we had a really good response rate, and a lot of entities responded to the salary survey request. So all of the data that we collect is through the use of a survey, and we make sure that we define each position so that the data we're collecting is accurate for the position. Each position is given a short position description, because we know that sometimes, another entity might have a similar job, but maybe the job title is different. So we make sure that we define the position and we review all the information that's gathered to ensure that it's appropriate. Salary ranges are the preferred method to gather data. Sometimes, or we also collect actual salary data, but we really look at the range data because that gives us a better idea of what the actual market is for positions. And then it's also important to note that all of the data that we collected and the salary ranges that we have recommended are the current market for the position. So those are current as of now, and the data that we've collected over the last few months. So both of those components then led to the proposed compensation plan. What we've done is calculated 2 different plans, one at the 50th percentile and one at the 60th percentile. And those are calculated based on the market data of the salaries of the entities surveyed. And that's also shown in table 1. Really quickly, just to touch on kind of what the 50th and 60th is, the 50th percentile really puts you at market. So, 50% of those are paying a little more, 50% are paying less. Overall, I would definitely say, and that's kind of my last bullet point here, I'm jumping ahead, but overall, the current salary ranges for the district are very competitive with the market, and they seem to be at or around the 50th percentile for most positions. So I think, that's a really good thing to note. The 60th percentile then puts you a little bit above market where, 60% are below and 40% are above. So we calculated pay ranges and pay plans at both the 50th and 60th percentile. So there's 12 compensation grades at each of those plans, and those are established across 6 pay bands. So each band is comprised of a grade or a couple grades, and that break into grades depends on what we see in the market. So there's grade 1, grades 2 through 6, grade 7 through 9, grade 10, grade 11, and then grade 12. An important thing to note is that the current range spread with the district's current plan is 50%. So that means the minimum of 1 grade to get to the maximum, it's 50% more. That is fairly large. Typically we see it being around 40%. It's not bad that it's at 50%, but it is a little large. So what we did is at the 50th percentile, kept that range spread at 50% from the minimum to the maximum. But then at the 60th percentile, we reduced that a little bit to a 40% range spread. And then gradation really just means the difference between 1 grade to the next within a pay band. And that really is to avoid any compression issues between the minimum of 1 grade and the minimum of the next. So there's a 5% gradation between grades 2 and 6 and grades 7 and 9. And all of this information is kind of summarized on table 1. And I know it's a lot of information, but table 1 is really that comprehensive table that captures all of the internal equity, the external market data, and then shows the proposed range spreads. So the next component is once a pay plan is established and recommended, these are kind of our recommendations for implementation. So anyone who is currently below the minimum of the compensation range for their classification should be raised to the minimum as soon as possible. So if someone's being paid below what we're proposing as the minimum, they should be raised to that minimum as soon as possible. If they're within the range, they can be slotted into the new pay plan at their current rate. And then this last bullet point does not apply to anyone, but if it did, this would be our recommendation. So if there was an employee who was being paid outside of the maximum of the proposed range, we would not recommend a pay decrease, rather just a pay, not even really a freeze, but kind of hold them there until the market catches up, but they could still receive increases based on performance that aren't applied to the base. Another kind of important thing when looking at implementation is that the district currently uses a 4-7 plan, which really ensures that employees are moving through the range based on the market and then based on how long they've been there. So employees should be halfway between the minimum and the midpoint if they've been there for 4 years, and then at least at the midpoint by 7 years. We do see that as kind of a standard practice, 7 to 8 years being at or near the midpoint if performance has been good. So I think that's a good plan to continue. One thing that we see when looking at your current plan is a lot of employees kind of stay then at that midpoint and don't move beyond that. And so since your range spread is so large, you don't see a lot of employees moving, between the midpoint and the maximum. So one thing to consider and something you could implement is adding a 10-year option. So it would kind of be like 4, 7, and 10. And then the 10-year option would ensure that employees continue to move, again, as long as their performance is adequate. And at 10 years, they should be somewhere between that midpoint and maximum. And again, so I already talked about my last bullet point here, but like I said, with the current range spread being 50%, we really see a lot of the current employees who have been there for more than 7 years, not really moving beyond that midpoint. And then going forward, once this plan is put into place, there's kind of 2 components that should be reviewed and looked at annually. You don't need to do a full study or a comprehensive study for at least, 5 to 10 years, but on the classification side, it's important to review positions annually and respond to changes. So if there's a job that took on additional duties, maybe that position needs to be rescored and you need to make sure it's still in the same range. So the same grade, sorry. We've provided the tools that allow you to do that, and then we're obviously always around to help with those questions as well. And then on the compensation side, it's important to adjust your pay ranges annually to make sure they stay current with the market. And you can do this by not a full survey like we did, but a simple survey to the entities saying, you know, what was your most recent increase, take an average of that and adjust the ranges by that. So it's important that this plan we're recommending now is current based on the market as of the last few months. So when you look to implement it and go into your next fiscal year, it'll need to be adjusted again. Again, not a full study, but the ranges need to be adjusted to make sure they're staying current with the market. And then that last bullet point, consider pay adjustments. That would be, again, if there's a position that has moved grades or been combined with another position, you're going to need to consider pay adjustments for them. So kind of two components to look at annually, but as long as the system is updated and maintained, it should be good for years to come. So I know that was a lot of information. I'm happy to review any of the tables or answer any questions at this time.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Sean Zimmerman. I have a question. This is in relation to the initial interviews that you did with employees to determine job duties. So can you explain a little further how you use that information? Because at least I would think that it would be, a combination of employee defined duties, but also the district has defined duties. If they were to go put that job out of the marketplace, they've defined that, and then, a definition from their supervisor. So how do you use the information from the employee interviews?
Yeah, good question. So what we do is it's kind of a 3 or 4 step process. So we want to understand and know how employees interpret their position. So they fill out what we call that job analysis questionnaire. I think it's included in Appendix A in the report. And they fill that out. Supervisors and department heads review that. We always remind department heads and supervisors not to make changes to what their employees said, because we really want to understand how employees feel about their position. But there is a spot where they can provide comments or feedback at the bottom and then sign off on that. After that, that comes to GovHR along with the job description for the position. And our consultants review both of those documents and then have those virtual interviews with at least one person in each position to really verify and expand upon the job and understand the position as it relates to the conservation district. Because a lot of times, there's the same job title, but it's a little different and unique for every community that we work with. So we expand upon it there. And then after that interview, they score the position, which is called the job factor analysis score. And that's how we develop the classification plan. And that's always the first component in the study, is making sure, all positions are classified correctly. And then the second component is applying that external market data and creating the ranges.
So there's situations where, an employee is defining their own duties and it's a little outside of the description, or maybe what your supervisor is saying, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so we kind of take all that into consideration. I can't think of a specific example of, that happened in this study, but that's happened before in other studies. And that's why it's really important. Our consultants are all professionals that have worked in government and local government for a long time. So when they talk to them and really understand kind of what their duties are, that's what they score them based on. But let's say there is a position that maybe they provide duties that aren't listed in their job description. That's something that we would comment on and leave notes on for the district that would say job description needs to be updated to reflect these duties or this experience. And then if we do that, then we know that that position was scored with including those duties in there.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel,
Yeah, good question.
Hi, Rachel. Trustee Weiser, I have a follow-up question to John's question. Is there any reason to use one if maybe 3 or 4 people are in a classification? Would it be more productive, counterproductive? Just the reasoning behind using one person versus 2 or 3 or 4 people, and they may have different perspectives.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't catch all of that question. It cut out just a little bit. Could you repeat that?
Sure. Instead of having one individual in a given job, give you the feedback and walk through the job factor analysis. Would it be more beneficial to have 2 or 3 or 4? So I was interested in why using just one from a given position in a classification versus 2 or 3 or 4 individuals if they were available.
Got it. Yeah. So actually, positions that have more than one employee in them, and I'd have to go back and see, but we typically do a group interview with up to 2 or 3 employees, you know, to collect more feedback than just one person, especially for jobs that have a lot of employees. So every employee would still fill out the JAQ, and then that interview would be a group interview with 2 to 3 people.
Could I interject one thing, Rachel? This is Andy.
Yes.
And you may have said this, maybe I missed it, but you know, once the employee fills out that form, the other big part of that is the supervisor of that employee then reviews everything that that employee wrote down and signs off on it. So, and you know, if you see a discrepancy there, the supervisor often would make comments and catch it.
Okay, a lot of job descriptions, most of them have one of them that's other duties as assigned.
Right.
And what happens is, you know, through evolution, something new comes up and somebody gets a new responsibility. This is a good opportunity to document it and update the description.
Any other questions? I see, you know.
I looked through this appendix C. Okay, and then what, some of it is where they're said, you know, not applicable. That means that they don't have some of these like park districts didn't have the position. Is that what that means?
That's correct. So any NAs mean they said no position match or they didn't have that position. We always show all of the raw data. So if there were, you'll see on some of the data tabs, there's some like blue highlights. So we show what they gave us, but then we didn't feel those were position matches to what, you know, the position at the conservation district. So again, we show the raw data on the first sheet, and then on the second one, you'll see it says edited without those. But any data that they provided us is shown in there. And NA means they don't have that position, correct?
Then one more question. So you said that, maybe you kind of answered it. How come you didn't take anybody from the West? Like all the comparables were from the East, like Rockford, Boone County or DeKalb, or how come they all went East?
So it looked, I think the East ones are just the ones that score. I'm looking at the analysis. Yeah, Rockford Park District is in there. They scored below 50 points. DeKalb Forest Preserve's in there. It looks like they scored 27 points. So we did include all of those East communities and entities in the analysis, but the ones that scored the highest seem to all be the other direction. So the most comparable, and that's what we try to do when we're looking at comparable entities, is really determine ones that are most similar to yours based on those financial criteria, because that, you know, we look at population and proximity, but also number of employees and total wages. So really looking at communities that are and entities that are most representative of yours.
I see you're recommending the open range merit plan. Would that be very easy to implement?
So yes, I think it is, you know, and I think it does a good job of allowing employees to see like what their growth could be if they were looking at a different position within a different grade, or even within their current grade, you know, what is the maximum salary range for them, and if they perform well, they should move through the range. And I think that's another component of why we kind of recommended or thought you should look at adding that tenure, because we see a lot of your current salaries being right there around the midpoint.
Anything else?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, I think they just did a really good job on the survey. I've been involved in a lot of surveys, and you know, they went after 23 entities and got data from 19. That's just a huge, you know, that
for that kind of a return is great. They're all within a 40-mile radius of Woodstock. And then the criteria they used are, they're just really fair comparable. So I so, compliment that. And then the point system that they use to try and line up the job descriptions, I thought that was very thorough. I think the recommendations are good. To me, we set out to do this thing to find out where are we relative to the market. And I think what we got back was we are below market in some areas. We're in better shape, I think, than we thought,
Right.
which is good. But we do have some areas that need to be addressed. And I think, going forward, some of the things we should consider, or maybe in the strategic plan is, do we put in some sort of a merit-based system to try and figure out so that everybody doesn't get the same percentage increase, yes or no? And then secondly, should we be at the 50th percentile, should we be at the 60th percentile? That's something just to discuss, for down the road for long term. And whatever adjustments do need to be made, it's nothing that we have to do all at once. We can do it, over a 2 or 3 years. Yeah, exactly. But again, I think it's good work, and good recommendations.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I'd just like to offer some additional thoughts, Lloyd. I would agree. The methodology definitely was solid. The approach is very common. From a human resources perspective, the job point factor analysis. And I really do like that, the whole notion, if possible, to pay for performance. To say, hey, if somebody does something exceptional, flatline, but is there a way to recognize performance? Yeah, and of course, I'm new to the team. I get no idea if we were above, if we were below, or if we were at. So it was enlightening.
I just gotta piggyback off, Pat, what you had brought up about going east rather than west. Just to clarify, because I was thinking maybe the same thing, I'm not sure. But obviously, the farther east we go, cost of living is much more. And you can't compare cost of living here to Chicago, So is that what you were saying? Obviously, you got an Arlington Heights Park District, which.
Well, it costs more to live there, so you gotta get paid more.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Obviously I work in the federal government, so I look at it in that aspect. And, your locality pays based on where that office is located. Your commute don't matter. It doesn't matter where you commute from. It matters what office you report to, right? So I was kind of thinking the same thing, like how comparable is it when we say an Arlington Heights or a Mundelein or a Palatine? I mean, those are expensive places to live when you compare it to if you were to buy a home within
Woodstock.
10 miles of here. Yeah, exactly, in Woodstock, yeah, so.
But they did use some comparables with DeKalb and Rockford and stuff, so, but they got thrown out because they were lower percentile. So. Any other comments or questions for Rachel? Thank you. You did a great job, and I think we're gonna work on that thing.
Yeah, so the next step that we have, and we've selected, right, thank you, we've got 2 trustees that have been kind of tapped to work through reviewing of kind of what a recommendation will be, and that will be the costing and how we implement and look at all these options, and then we'll come back to the board with the recommendation, hopefully by the October meeting.
And what the compression issue is something else we should look at and see if there's something we can do there too, because I think that's one thing that, when they saw the schematic of where everybody felt, man, we got, this big grouping here and a big grouping here.
The flat line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an issue that, can be addressed. There's different ways to go about it.
Okay, good. Okay,
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time tonight. And I just want to thank Andy and Elizabeth and Jenny again for all their work. And I'll be around as questions come up, but thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
okay, we'll move on to new business. One new business thing that's not on the agenda is gonna announce there's somebody in the house that's having a birthday. Amy Peters, congratulations.
Thank you. It's a surprise birthday party for me. You shouldn't have.
Yeah. You're working? Yeah.
Where else would you rather be?
Yeah.
Nowhere else.
Now, is there a tradition, do we sing happy birthday or?
No.
Not recognizing the details. Yeah.
We also have a new grandpa too here.
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Added to his family this week.
It's an interesting 3 o'clock in the morning.
oh boy. Good, all right, the agenda for the regular meeting, was there any changes or corrections anybody want to talk about?
You mean their poll items or?
Or, yeah, you could, in the consent agenda, you, Pat had questioned 12.10. Maybe pull that and get a little bit more explanation on that.
Yeah, so let's see if we can answer the questions tonight if we
Yeah,
can,
and
and
then
if
we
we can
can
stay
leave it
or
on there,
pull. So this is 1210 is the foundation partnership on a grant with Enbridge on the foam sprayer.
Yeah, I think we can answer it. That is in the camp for next year. So we found, a grant that we may be able to get it this year with the grant, in which case we would pull it out of camp. So we'd be able to save some money from, in the camp fund and still be able to get the piece of equipment.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Is that something that you need?
What is a piece of
It's a slip-on firefighting unit. So we have them now. Those, I think you guys saw them before. Those are the El Cheapos.
Hmm.
And, they do wear out over time. We use them a lot.
Well, yeah, if you're using them.
This would, we still have ones that are in good condition, but we want to have some depth with that during the burn season if one goes down, so.
So these are units that slide back and
They
pick up?
slide the back of the pickup.
Okay, and they some spray foam too or something?
They can spray foam, we tend to be
That's what my
very,
question was. I never saw any. with
A foam
that.
spray.
Yeah, that's all.
yeah.
That was the,
I didn't,
gotcha.
And we tend to be very careful with that because foams, if you don't use the right foam, you can have issues with it on carry over on the land, but we do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, good, good. That answered, all right, so we'll keep that in the agenda, on the agenda.
I did want to highlight if I could, just there was a couple of others that came in after the packet and we added to the agenda, and that was 1212 and 1213.
You're right.
So, the 1212, there was a change order, so obviously it's under the threshold of ratification that I've executed, but this is to affirm that's through our policy for that to go forward. And that was the things that were discovered, again, don't think all things happen, change orders happen in large projects, so that's advanced. The other item, 1213, and this is just a clarification, so back in July, the board did authorize, as you know, and we've got a strike that we're working through with obtaining vehicles. We've already got reappropriation from last year on vehicles with orders that have been put in. Nothing's been delivered as of yet. And then we have this year's budgeted items. And so we're getting further and further behind. So in essence, we did authorize some flexibility, state bid or for us to bid directly. The only thing this is doing is also giving one more option that staff researched, and that is piggybacking with the county. They go out and they do the bid, and then we would get into their prices that they've already taken care of, and we're allowed per their contract to do that. Just the one shift. So there may be some vehicles where that's appropriate. We bring it into discussion that we had when it was brought to my attention that we've been normally looking like at Ford or something. And so this is the county's using Dodge. And so staff reviewed, we asked a lot of questions on, you know, the mileage, repairs, access to obtaining this, and I felt comfortable, you know, right now, we need to get vehicles in, or we're gonna be, what is it, about a third of the fleet that you think, Don, what's that number?
Yeah, in a year, if we don't get more vehicles, we'll be down, a third of our fleet, basically. So
Right,
that needs to
so
be
we need
taken
to take action.
Right.
care of. You got it.
Wow.
So this is an option for us here.
Okay,
We think it'll work.
good. So when will you know with that county bid thing?
Well, as soon as you guys give us the approval, we'll be going to them and requesting the order. Terry, do you know the number off the top of your head?
Yeah, we're looking at a couple of the new squads. As well as, right now, we currently have available the Ram 2500s, heavy duty trucks with Lerdo. And then the two vans that are budgeted for this current fiscal year will be available later on this fall. And then the 1500 half tons, we spoke to Rob Richardson, the fleet manager for the county. He said those should be available the new model year, the first of this year, for the first of the year.
So that would,
That pretty much covers our needs for this current fiscal year. And then what we placed for an order last year in November, That was through the state purchasing program. Those were the utility trucks, the heavy duties as well. Those expected delivery is supposed to be sometime yet this fall. But again, that turnaround right is a year, which is pretty lengthy. The good news with the county purchasing program through and with the Dodges, if they aren't readily available through their current dealership, which is Sunnyside, once the order is placed, we're looking at 4 to 8 weeks, so 1 to 2 months versus we're pushing 12 months with the state purchase program.
Right.
So this will really good us spot up.
Okay, I think we'll keep that on the agenda then, fine?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I guess next will be 6.2, budget discussion.
On the capital asset management plans, we've got this broken into a couple different presentations. We're just going to start off with the bricks and mortar, and Amy Peters is going to lead that, and I'll put her screen up, then we'll follow with the natural capital, and we'll provide that presentation, then we can discuss just the report that was placed in the packet on Fox Bluff. So I'm gonna change here.
Well, while she's getting that, queued up, just wanted to, we're not gonna jump right to, 2025 yet. We wanted to give you a little look at what we're doing now with, what we talked about last year, with the camp, just to give you a little bit of a project update and what we have been doing and are currently doing. It's hard to talk about, most of these large scale projects, in 1 year blocks, because some of them take 2, 3, even longer. So I want to walk you through some of the projects that we're currently doing. And then we wanted to tell you a little bit how we take a look at ourselves and how we're assessing the projects and what we're doing. Make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And then we'll get to, I think, the sheets that you were all given, which is what we're proposing for the camp projects of the upcoming 2025. We did go out into the other additional 2 years, 26 and 27, but I can answer questions, but really focusing on the 25. So let's run through our show of pretties. And the first project, we've been focused on Prairie Trail. And again, for those of you, Prairie Trail is our largest regional trail system. It's over 25 years old. And most of these projects, it's asphalt, drainage, just surface, that's never been, they're still original from the 25 plus years old. So this will be the first time that they're being repaired on a large scale. The next broken down will be just the conservation areas. We've categorized these for you in your sheet. That's the building structure demolition that we've been doing. Then we have some improvements on the buildings, and then a new initiative, which again has been ongoing with the ADA improvements at Hollows. So this is just, it does not do it justice, but this is the Prairie Trail South project, where we were able to work with the village of Lake in the Hills and Remander, part of the tributary down there. So you can see a picture of the existing, how close the water is rushing by and deteriorating the trail. And it was basically that way from the get-go, because we didn't have the acres to do the work. And then the picture of currently now and how we were able to move and get distance away from our trail. I have a full booklet of that project because it was, just a great opportunity. So if anybody's interested in seeing more plans, more pictures, because obviously one, for the sake of time, does not do it justice, but you get the idea of what we were able to do, not with just the surface, but again, for habitat. We got to use some different technologies for slowing down the water, and just a great success story.
So you didn't move the water, you moved the trail.
No, we moved the water.
Oh, you did move the water. Okay.
Yeah, the trail's in the same place.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So
Is it a creek or where's the
it
water?
is it is a creek, but it's also coming from the stormwater from the neighborhood. Most of it is coming from the Meyer Material gravel pit. So they were also very gracious, and we could not have done some of the project without them for staging standpoint. But they're saying, so then there's a detention basin just north of where this project started, and so that's we did box culverts, we redid all of the stormwater, so there were old culverts that were running from the Meyer lot under our trail and into here. So again, just the quantity and the sheer pace of the water that was coming through there. Again, it was just always scouring. So again, we were able to we gave some distance. We were able to put in some different riffles, again, with rock to slow the water down. We used, I don't have a picture. I don't have a picture of the lunker structures. But again, what that did when we couldn't get more distance from the trail to the water, and we still needed to have that straight area, this were boxes basically sort of flipped on their side so that we could stack more material on top of them, but you'd still have the water course underneath it. So again, they were designed in Wisconsin, and we haven't been able to use it, but again, we just had a great team from a design standpoint. From the cooperation from the community. We had a great
Is this the one down by
contractor.
Scorched Earth?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
yeah, yes, this is the one, so, yes, we need to have another. Yes, if we need to have another tour of the project.
We might, I
No.
heard that some employees wanted
We'd
to.
be happy to, yes, it's a direct connection, you can walk there.
That's what I heard, yeah.
About the area that flooded, that loop before you get to that part of the trail? That was part of this correction too, correct?
Yeah, so like I said, now we have larger capacity, we have more capacity, and we were, so we could widen it, so hopefully we should not have, that flooding any longer.
Good, excellent.
And the next project, is not in construction phase, it's in engineering right now, but this is the section in Crystal Lake. It's mostly known for the Stearns Woods section that we partnered with the Park District there, as well as part of the nature preserve. And so this is, you either love it or hate it. It has curves, it has there's over 22% topography change in a very small area. And so what we're hoping to do, again, we need new asphalt. That was, again, why it lands on a capital asset management plan first. But what we're hoping is that we can,
Sorry, I'm trying
that's
to,
okay.
at home, they're having a hard time following because it's a delay with the internet.
Okay, so we're just in engineering phase right now. We're gonna see if there are any areas that we can reduce both the radiuses, the tight radiuses, open up the line of sight, and if there are areas where we can grade it a little bit differently. But it's challenging. I know some people don't want us to do that.
Yeah, that's my backyard.
So this is also the section that runs through the ComEd, and you'll be very happy to know that we can't change the grade in there. They won't let us. So I'm not sure how much we'll be able to do, right?
I understand.
But yeah, when you see some of the strollers trying to get up the hill, you think, oh, we should probably do something. And there have been some, not recently, we've done more signage, but again, it's always, some of the trees are in some precarious spaces, and if someone's going down too fast, we want to be mindful of that. So we're just taking a look at it. So then in 2025, you'll see that we're put some money towards then the actual construction. This project, again, still Prairie Trail, is then just an example of what the existing conditions look like. This was south of Bernard Mill. We did as much ditching as we could. We have very little space, as you can see. But this one was one that we had, the bike trail grant. So it was a 50-50, from IDNR, and that's completed. That's, yeah, there's nothing special there. This is the section then that is, crushed limestone. So this is the multi-use, this is where the horse trail, ends on the south end, and then they can go north from here on up to, North Branch. But this is right behind the Rusty Nail, we give them a shout out. Basically, it was just, again, we did.
I didn't inspect that trail.
So, right, just a few, the main goal here was is we needed to define a ditch and clear out the vegetation so that the water coming from Ringwood Road had a place to go. And then we updated, right there at the road, you know, how we're, the drainage, how we're catching it, extended our apron a little bit so that we weren't washing, it was constantly washing out, and it was, again, an area where there was nowhere else for the water to go, so it would sit on district property. And again, that was something that, we worked with the village on, and, so we're glad to get that one completed. Hopefully, we won't have to dig another ditch for another 50 years. This is almost ready for bid let. This is up in Glacial Park. So this is where the Prairie Trail crosses our Harts Road. And as you can see, it just, again, the road needs some updates. Again, here we need to do ADA, so it should have detectable warnings, update some signs. The other thing that we're gonna do here, just because of line of sight, we've met with the Road Township Commissioner, Chris Stone. We're gonna install one of the beacons, goodness, that, you know, for push, and that way then on the line of sight, since we can't lower it, we get it a little safer, because right now people are coming down that hill a little bit fast.
Is that something to be like at Main Street in Crystal Lake where you push a button and
Yep,
that-
yeah, it's there's some in the Ringwood area too. Mostly, it's usually the municipalities that put them in. Again, in this case, because of the road is in our park, it's a collaborative effort, again, of putting that in. But hopefully, like I said, it's almost up to bid. Okay, conservation area that we're focused on is the hollows. I've broken this down into two, just for this, but we're really working on them together. So the hollows in Cary, we're focused on the Lake Atwood recreational amenity out there. We have two different grants for it, but this is an example of the existing trail that goes around the lake, and we want to make that ADA. So we're hopefully on Tuesday, we'll have approval of hiring an engineering firm to help us with the design. This particular grant is OSLED that we were awarded. So that'll be helping pay for, that one is a 50-50 as well. Glacial Park football building demo. We are down, everything's down. So we have this picture of the football building that, only thing we're working on next is the utilities. So, we're still working with electrical and just, order issues. Everything's trenched. And you can see that their new shop, that corner there is the Region 1 shop. And so we closed off that little awkward, wall that they shared. And that's where new electric is going. We were able to get new fueling station up at this time too. So that was a good thing to do. But we are still working on this. So this is in progress. This is just again a before and after of our intern resident. No major issues on this one. It went fast.
Now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah.
And then this is the, former research field station that was up at the top of the hill where the district used to have a main office as well. My very first office was in the basement there under the deck. And so now that's too gone and the road is gone and it's, restored. So, we're almost to the finish line of that one. Building improvement. So this is Lost Valley Visitor Center, and again, just a snapshot of a section before we painted and after, filled some holes for the woodpeckers, the decks. So again, just they did a really nice job of finishing that and cleaning it up. The other one is our Region 6 shop, which is there at Prairie View Education Center. You can see the existing or the rot is just an example of where why we needed to do what we the reciting, and I believe that that's almost close to being finished, if not finished. So,
I got a question on that one.
sure.
Do they have a rain gutter on there? On that roof?
On the new,
Well, yeah, that's probably why it rots all the time. The water runs down and off the roof.
Yeah, so our
It looks like on the new one, it's, the tin is all wet already, doesn't it?
I think it's just the shadow.
Yeah, that's the winner.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think it's just a shadow. But no, our staff went in there and took care of some of the, and Perry jump in if there's something specific that I'm missing, but is taking and making sure that, yes, the water is being, taken away from it, and they fixed up the windows. There were some issues that, right, our staff did prior to this reciting.
But does this have gutter? I'm seeing what you see. I don't see the gutters there. Was this taken before they put the gutters on, or?
Or should-
I don't believe that the building has gutters.
maybe we should recommend.
Well, see, cause I mean, I know that. I
It
mean,
does
the
not
water
have
runs
gutters.
down and hits on the ground and then it,
Yeah, you can see on the old part.
yeah, it's always wet.
So they may want on those eaves that.
I mean, it's
Yeah, it's something to,
observation, that's all.
something to look into.
Good eye there.
I mean, sometimes we have the
Gotta
same
get
problem
water away.
on sheds, you know.
This is the second project at the Hollows that we're tying in together, but this is a new initiative in the case that we don't actually have a kayak launch. This one also is a grant funded, through IDNR. It is the, boat access, grant. And, we're again currently in design phase of that. The next couple of slides is just to tell you about how we are assessing what we're doing. And we established this specifically for the strategic plan of 21 and 23. But basic, we have a 5-point system. You can read up there, one is we've got to do something. We either need to remove it or it can't be repaired. It's beyond safety. All the way to 5, which is then, what we would classify a new project or something that we just completed. And we originally had 3 categories. We were looking at water, recreation, we were looking at regional trails, and then we were looking at our conservation areas and sort of evaluating them based off of this point system. So this is a snapshot. It's not everything, but it shows that our regional trails, right? And you can see the Prairie Trail North, you can see the Lincoln, you can see the South. Those were pictures and projects that we just talked about and showed you the pictures and the success stories. And so you can see then, right, in 21, when we first, put this together, we knew, yeah, we have these issues. Here are the maintenance needs. And then we put together a schedule. And so then throughout the next 3 years, you can see, right, how the projects that we have implemented have impacted then that score, right? So at the end of 2023, we can show that, we're 100% of our regional trail systems are satisfactory or above. The next category was water recreation areas. again, same thing. This is just a snapshot and I tried to gather, to fit on this slide, examples of everything so that you could see what does a beyond repair or a pour look like. And so, you know, the example up there is Brookdale. And again, it's just because we have limited access. We control that. Yeah,
Can I, add you something to Brooke?
you bet.
For clarification, that does not mean this pond here.
Oh, yes,
It's that Beaver Pond off Paulson Road, which is very remote
thank you.
for
Yes,
accessibility purposes.
yes, absolutely. That's a great point. The Hollows, highlighting that one because again, it's a project that we're currently working on so that we can, you know, we've assessed that and focused on that. Trying to think of anything else that one is, again, we have some in the poor category, but again, most of it is just like Perry was saying, it was accessibility to, you know, lack of amenities, that kind of a thing. And they're larger projects, right, that we need the funds to move that needle up. The third category was just more in general. So again, same point system. In this case, I didn't show where we started in 21. So these are the current, this is, you know, based off of where we are right now in 2023. But again, we have some that just have some trail signage that we're working on. Again, a site like Alden Gap, which is meant to be primitive. It wasn't meant to be, you know, a 5. That's why, again, another example of why it is what it is. It is what it is. Exeter Marsh, again, just a good example. It's a small site and it's, we have 2 access points. One, they're both gravel, but one's really small. It doesn't have all of the amenities. That's off of Miller. That's why it's a 2. Whereas the Lakewood has just more amenities. And again, that's why it's categorized with a little bit more points. I think, like I said, it's just a snapshot of, again, the story that is being told and trying to convey that, yeah, we do have a science behind why we're doing what we're doing and making sure that we are, you know, moving forward in the right direction.
And moving everything satisfactory on Bob, so when we look at deferred maintenance or where the district has been in those investments and staff capacity, right, looking to really see how much was falling off and where. And so I think with this program and with the investments and the ability to take the levy and the work that the board and the staff, you know, we're working our way through that, so.
Yeah, and again, this isn't all of our sites. We did evaluate all of our sites. Now for the questions, probably mostly, this is for the upcoming project, and this is based off of the Excel sheet that I think you all were shared. So these are the projects that we're proposing for the upcoming fiscal year and the camp. If you want to click to the next, no, it's fine. That was just so same categories. We've got regional trails, conservation areas, building demo, we have building improvements, and then we have new initiatives. Some of these are carryovers. So the Hollows, we're carrying over the Prairie Trail projects. The first 2 again are just continuations of what we've already started. Most of these you've seen because last year you saw the 3-year snapshot, and these would have been in included in that next year. I think the larger change or the bigger change in some of this is in the building improvement projects. And that's just because we're getting, you know, we're taking more of an assessment on all of the buildings that we have, and those things are, you know, ever changing. So we've put money in towards some exterior painting of a couple of historic buildings that we have. We have, though that was an ad, the Glacial Paraplegic barn, it's at a trailhead. The deck, needs some repairs. It could be used, similarly to an outdoor shelter if we made some improvements. So that's why you see that on there. Again, the Feltwell Triple R is just some plumbing, that they're just old. Those were buildings that we inherited. The kitchen is an interesting one because John Kramer has submitted and has been working with the county on funding assistance for a potential new way of getting money for demoing. So we're really excited for John.
Hopeful. Eggs not in the basket yet, so.
Right, but we're looking at that.
So who are you working with on that?
Say that again?
Who are you working with on that?
Well, the county has several different programs and you can step in, but
A number of years ago, I saw that the program called Community Block Program would fund light removal, it was called. And so to me, that meant building demo could be applied to that. So I reached out to the county, I believe it was in the early spring, maybe it was in the winter. And they said, yeah, yes, indeed, it is and can be used for that. The application period opens in October and sunset, or it concludes in January. So I'll be reaching out to them. They've done some preliminary work on it. They think it applies or that it will apply for the grant. But we'll have to work with them to get the actual application done. I'll be coming back to the board in October with a little bit more detail. Right now, I don't have a lot of detail on it. To see if it's even possible or plausible.
Good, thanks.
And the other new one, I guess, of note, is working with, it's down in new initiatives. Again, it's back to the Prairie Trail, but working with MCDOT actually on signage and wayfinding, where again, there would be a partnership of funding as well as just resources. And that's been a long, need for, I think, that trail system. So, if anybody has specific questions, I guess that's, to start shooting them.
Okay, I'm kind of going through this,
Yeah.
The amphitheater, that's where we had the picnic that time?
Yeah,
Were they
yes,
gonna
it
put-
is.
So you're gonna put screens on that and,
So on that shelter, yes, we're proposing to see if we can bring, some of the electric and, we've had, and screens, just some updates so that,
Pleasant Valley?
it makes it just a little more comfort, for people. It's one of our highest used, rentable spaces for weddings. And so the comment, feedback that we get from, the users are, hey, it would be great if we could, plug in a crock pot, or hey, it would be great if, we weren't spotting, this mosquitoes. So yes. And then the actual amphitheater itself, if you went down, the stone, what we were, hoping to do, again, there are some spots where we can't get anything to grow. And so if you remember, it has that, limestone, walk. We just want to put it in, extend that in the little spaces, sort of on the, plateau where they, set up, and just to help those areas. So that's what that is.
And I got another question. And the generator. We
Okay.
talked about this generator like a year or two ago, and it was 50,000 then, and we thought it was too much money. Now it's 124,000. And the power went off how many times since you've had the place? Not very many.
No, I can address that, Pat. What we did with this is we wanted to get hard, solid numbers on what it would cost to do something like this. Because that $50,000 number was kind of a plug number. We didn't necessarily know. So we went back and studied it. If you want, I can talk at great length about what we studied, or I can simply say that answering your question specifically, we've owned it since 2006, that's 17 years.
We've had two multiple day power outages there, okay? One of them occurred in the middle of the summer, which did not have an impact on the building. Disrupted staff a little bit, but that was it. The other one occurred last winter, in February, when that ice storm came through, probably knocked out power to all of us. And it was out for 56 hours, and staff was actively monitoring the building. And on Friday night, after it was out for about 50 hours, it had gone down to, it gone down to 42 degrees at 6 p.m. that night. Earlier that day, we had brought out a contractor, worked with a contractor to drain back the fire suppression system that was, we thought, most vulnerable. That was taken care of. And at midnight that night, the power came back on, which is exactly when ComEd predicted it would come back on. ComEd has gotten, they're not perfect, but they've gotten a lot better at narrowing that down. And so in the conversations I've had with staff, I said, first of all, we owe this to the board. We owe what I think is a hard, fast number that says this is what we need to do and this is what it's gonna cost out there, okay? To put in a transfer switch, et cetera. We owe that to you guys, so we presented that. We also owed you that data about, hey, how often does this happen? It doesn't happen very often. In talking with the staff, what I've gotten from Larry Nichols, who's our building maintenance supervisor, he said, look, I'm confident that we can keep this thing fine with a 3-day power outage. Perry and I have been talking about it, Larry Perry and I have been talking about it. We think that with just some preventative measures, for instance, everybody saw that storm coming. We knew it was coming. We knew it was going to come in the area. If we had, and just preemptively thought about it, we probably could have gone up there and goosed the heat on that, taken it up. If we could have gotten up 6-8 degrees, that's a big bill, and we probably could have easily held it for another day above freezing. It never got below freezing. We never had frozen pipes. But, so $124,000 by someone who is responsible for the survival of buildings and things like that, some peace of mind. But that's an awful lot of money for peace of mind.
Yeah, that's
So,
what I'm thinking.
and so, you know, and I've talked with Harry at length about it. I've talked with Larry at length about it. And we all look at one another and say, we think we can figure out a way to keep that building okay for, you know, several more days. And one of the ways, and Barry said it earlier today, is just maybe we go out and we take some money and we buy some heaters that are a little larger. And we make sure that we have the small portable generators to go with it that we could actually put in the building ahead of it dropping in temperature. You know, when we see this coming, when we know we're on it. So if the prediction comes out and says, hey, Lost Valley Visitor Center, we think you're gonna be out of power for 5 days, we immediately know that we've got to do some, a little bit more than we did last time to do it. So, yes, Sean.
I just was wondering on that price, is that, I don't wanna get in the weeds with this thing, but is that to fully function this building? Is that why it's so much?
Over the summer, we did an analysis on it to try to figure out how could we take and just, what are the critical components?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And so we looked at it from that standpoint, but what we've learned about the building is that because it was recently renovated, not recently renovated, but it was renovated to LEED standards, which means it's an extremely efficient building. 80% of the electricity that's used in that building is used in the mechanicals, and those mechanicals are spread all over the place. There are 13 different heat pumps in there. They all run off a geothermal system that basically then it siphons, you know, heat out of the earth, so to speak. But they're all over the building. There are leads coming out of the main transport. There are 2 main leads going to the right. There's 1 main lead going to the left. That's where we have to intercept it with a transfer switch right at that point. And then be able to hook up a portable generator to it. After we did the analysis, we figured out that there is no way, it actually would be way more expensive to try to just go in there and figure out how to fire up those and keep those 13 heat pumps going in all those different areas. So really what we're looking at is the bare minimum. It's a hard number. I mean, I'm fairly confident in that number. But you know, that's a lot of money for, something that doesn't happen very often.
I'm still catching that, but what's the purpose of the building?
That's where that's the main, that big building over there.
Visitor center.
Yeah,
Staff offices.
we've been there for,
Yeah,
you haven't been there.
foundation office.
They got a big boardroom or office.
We have meetings.
Yeah.
We haven't had
one.
There, yeah.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest building you have, right?
It is,
Yeah.
25,000 square foot building.
And a lot more complicated. A lot of the other buildings are residential type units and things, so that's got a more sophisticated.
Yeah, even this building is much more of a residential one than that one. That one is much more complicated than these are.
Yeah, but that's not that big of square footage, is it? It's a square footage.
Yeah, it's like 25,000.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah.
So that
it might
explains
not-
it, though. I understand now that it's not, the essentials are still require
Yeah.
a lot of work.
About 20% of it, because of efficient appliances and lighting and things like that, about 20% of the electric demand there is, are those things. Everything else are those mechanicals, the pumps, all of the stuff that keeps that building operating efficient. And it's really not, it's really tremendously efficient. When we took over it, we had looked at the ComEd bills on it, and I think they were $90,000 a year in electricity. And we have that down to, I'm going to guess it's less than 20. So it's significantly reduced.
Good. Pat's got one more question.
On the same, right, that fancy paver stone driveway you have over there.
Oh, the permeable.
Yeah, permeable pavement system maybe.
For you.
What does that involve? Taking that all up and putting it back down or what?
No, hopefully, taking care of it, annually and as we need to. It's, you don't have to do that, but it has purposefully, intentionally, it has different gravel base underneath it and a lot more of it, so that all of the water and all of the fluids that are coming from vehicles, right, can infiltrate into the ground, spend a longer time, and it's then hooked up to a green infrastructure system so that we are filtering all of that stuff back out of it before it goes back into the native. So that number is in an upcoming year. And so it's just sheer size. So what they're gonna do is they're gonna either herbicide or they're gonna blow out any of the leaves and trees and acorns and, stuff that doesn't, that's the sediment. Blow that out and then they'll just refill with the
Like sand, isn't it?
it's 16, CA 16 that then comes back in. Any areas that have, there are a few small areas, so that we're doing a section of it this year. Just, sort of spot treating it and anything that's sunk down just so that it's, but we haven't had to do anything major on it since we've gotten it. So
How
that's
old
nice
is
to
the
do.
parking lot?
It was 2010.
Yeah.
Oh,
13
wow.
years.
And it's all of it, so it's all of the parking lots, it's the turnaround, it's the walkways, and it's the back pool.
Blacktop, you'd be sealing it, patching it, striping it. and-
Yeah,
Are there any solar opportunities in the capital plan in terms of, like funding that's available for the government that we could do something in that area?
there are, but we haven't, we don't have a need necessarily for that fits. Small scale, we would love to do, solar panels over a parking lot and, things like that, would allow for, I think hookups for electrical vehicles, things like that. We've, researched things here and there. From an amenity standpoint, there's really interesting and neat opportunities for, instead of a typical shelter. I know that's not what you're asking, but for functioning of a building. We looked at it at LVVC, and unfortunately LVVC we weren't going to get enough sunlight, for the return, if I believe, again, it's a while ago. You know, we use solar, for our, security lighting at our sites. We haven't done an assessment like of this building or of Prairie View. Should we, could we?
Did you have any thoughts or?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it seems there's a bunch of money available now with this new package that was, the Congress signed, especially for solar projects, and, you know, we're out here and.
You know, again, I think that larger conversation of all of the district facilities, right? When we talk about shops and how do we make them more efficient, and, you know, we've got all these old buildings and, you know, things like that. I think it's, seen some, conservation areas do full studies on, energy efficiencies of their buildings and things like that would be interesting, but just haven't done that.
I'll just keep it open.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it comes up.
Thank you, Amy.
Could I just ask a quick question? What's the Hebron Trail Phase 1 engineering?
So Hebron Trail, right, is one of our 5 regional trails. It's, it runs, it connects to our Prairie Trail in our, North Branch. And then it connects all the way over to Hebron. There's a section, of Lang Road,
Right,
and the railroad crossing
yeah,
that, is a gap. We don't actually have a actual connection that the district owns.
so where it
That's
says
fun.
private property, U-turn, people used to
And-
go through it all the time.
And it crosses the railroad.
Right.
And the railroad, while it's in Illinois, it's owned by Wisconsin. So it's a little tricky. We've been focused on it for 25 years,
Yeah,
looking at all ways. And we've had some, you know, some options, working with Hebron, the village, you know, the village of
sure,
making improvements to that rail, but it's just complicated. So what that would be is we made a phase 1 engineer, we applied for a grant for it several years ago now. We didn't qualify. But again, it's one of those, you gotta line everything up, and we didn't have a phase 1 engineering study
okay,
to say, you know, we have internals looking at, can we cross it here? Can we go over? Can we go under? We've worked with, MCDOT on different things. So this would be, okay, we have to pull everybody together and we've got to come up with a plan.
yeah,
We looked at all kinds of different land acquisitions. So how do we get this?
and you just can't go straight
And
through?
we can't just go straight through because it's a mid-block crossing of a railroad, and it's just not allowed,
That was our first ask.
period.
Huh,
You just cannot do it. So that's why you have to get it out to the road,
yeah,
right? Or you have to elevate it or
it's
go.
just so often people are still go through it, yeah.
Well, it is, and again, right, we've done the best we can, but the
Sure.
railroad then has their maintenance drive that looks like a trail. And so
We're not
therefore,
directing it, we're not directing.
no,
it.
we have signs, we have all of the appropriate signs up there, but it is one that we just wanna keep on the top of the list to try to solve the problem.
If I could, just a couple things to highlight too, and I know in past years, and we do have another item of a historical structure that there is a report on. But you will see this based on, and I know we're gonna be setting up a meeting with the historical group, and again, the district does have historic properties. I think many of you have toured them or have looked at them or have been asked to look at them in this day. And so, staff did include just to do some painting and show that there is investments that are going into those properties. And another reference would be, and I can send it out too, I think it was about 2 years ago or so, we did an update to the board. A presentation was made on the status of historic structures and the investments that are needed, you know, what needs a roof, what was recommended to do. And so we probably need to revisit that, but at least that was identified here. The other thing I would say for discussion on the generator, it's a risk management. So really, you know, it's how you wanna roll the dice and make a determination of where, and you look at facts and going forward, you know, is it a predictor? And just, I think there's solutions that staff has had. So to take that in consideration, but if there's anything on this list that there's a disagreement with or needs, then we would love to hear, yeah, let's take that off. So for example, if the generator should be something to come off, we take it off, we don't advance it to the budget. Otherwise, it's here, we budget and then staff knows to, again, so decisions don't have to be, you're seeing this tonight for discussion. You know, you have some time, you know, to give that feedback to us, so like next Tuesday or so, but these are things as we go through the budget process. It's, the purpose of this is to identify those, right? And if there's something that you see that's not on here, then we would entertain that too and say, okay, where is it? Maybe it's not here, it's just planned, it's been deferred out to a, you know, because this plan goes, this is the next 3 years, right? And,
Right.
It keeps growing after that.
Right, yeah, you know, again, we're assessing, and we have, as much as we have tenure, you know, again, based off of type of surface, the material, you know, the lifespan of that, you know, just to give us, you know, little reminders, you know, that, oh, we need to go take a look at that kind of a thing, but, yeah, absolutely, and I know we didn't talk too much about the, 26 or 27, so, you'll get another chance to talk about those too.
Good. Well, everybody can look at this and then if we need to talk about it. Yeah.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 22B. Ed?
So I'll be talking about the natural capital, bit short, some projects. You're gonna run the machine?
I don't know, Ronald, yeah, unless you want to, you're more than welcome.
No, that's fine. They're not gonna be fun.
Okay, let's see here. So put here to-
So each year you see along with the Camp for Bricks and Mortar, the National Capital Improvement Plan or NCIP. And this plan deals with our natural capital, which is the lands and plants and animals that the district has affected over the years. The plan is updated yearly, each time we go into the budget cycle, but it's actually on a rolling project schedule. So we try to look out solidly for at least 3 years, and then we try to anticipate 2 years beyond that. So each year you'll see the Natural Capital Improvement Plan come to you with the actual plan itself will be extended out over several years, but what goes into the budget is what you'll see requested from camp for the coming year. We try to match the camp request for natural capital as closely to grants as possible. Whenever we see one that can possibly fill it, and that's the same as all the divisions here at the district. If there's funds out there to be had through a grant program, we do our best to get them. The Natural Capital Improvement Plan does not include capital requests for equipment, for vehicles, for technology needs, or shop facilities. It's strictly based on the land itself. And it covers projects that occur on the 99% of the lands that the district owns and manages for habitat. So you don't see natural capital improvement plans that will occur in development zones. These occur basically out on the landscape itself. So we have a few coming up this year, and I'll just go over them very briefly. These will be initiated for the most part between April 1st of 2024 when we enter the new budget year, and they'll be finished with all luck by the end of the budget year on March 31st, 2025. So at Glacial Park Conservation Area, we are working with partners, and you'll see that show up in just about every one of these slides. These projects typically attract more funding and are easier to do if we can bring partners in. So in this case, we're working with Open Lands and the Friends of Hackatack National Wildlife Refuge, and we're working on a split project. So there's about 180 acres that is being restored through funds that are coming from Congresswoman Underwood's Discretionary Congressional Community Projects Fund. And that was awarded a couple of years ago. It will occur directly adjacent to our holdings at Glacial Park. So our part of this partnership is we will be working on the lands that directly border it on the Glacial Park side. So it's one continuous wetland basin. We're going to work on both sides of the fence, so to speak. And we requested $100,000 for our share of the project. The Underwood project is $975,000, so just under $1 million. And unfortunately, because of the way permits go and what's required to get these projects going, Open Lands and the Friends were not able to start it this year, so they're just finishing up their permit process. So we're asking for a reallocation of that $100,000 to go into the same project for next year. We are ready to go at our end. At Marengo Ridge Conservation Area, we're doing an in-house project without a grant, which is not typical for how we generally do these. But we have a very isolated field coming out of production. It's very difficult to get to. It's very small. It's less than 20 acres. And we will be requesting $12,000 to put it in permanent hay cover and also to order tree planting stock. So we need a permanent cover on the land itself, and we'll be plugging trees in. But unlike a lot of our tree planting programs, this one will be done in-house by staff in kind of one opportunity. So we'll put all the trees in at once. Next. Back to Glacial Park, we did get a grant with the Wisconsin DNR and help with the McHenry County Conservation Foundation. It's for conservation of species of greatest conservation concern. And so there'll be projects going on both sides of the border. And this is, if you remember, a lot of this congressional money can't come directly to an organization like ours, which is a municipal unit of government. You have to have a state sponsor or an Indian tribe sponsor. We don't have that in Illinois. We don't have any tribal lands. So we partnered with the Wisconsin DNR, and we're going to be restoring habitat for the rusty patch bumblebee, which is federally endangered on both sides of the border. So this one's a little bit different in that the camp request is for $163,200 to do restoration work at Glacial Park and to plant some new prairies. But once the project is over, we'll be able to reimburse that fully to camp. So these grants work differently. Sometimes you can get the money up front. Sometimes you can get a little bit up front. Sometimes you have to wait till you're done and you turn in the bills. So this is one that we have to complete the project before we get the funding back. So we'll have an upfront advance from the camp funds and then reimburse camp the same amount of money. So it's essentially a short-term loan from our own camp fund. We'll be back at Pleasant Valley, and I think this was on last month's board packet, but we've applied with the foundation to IDNR to expand the habitat grant for the bison grazing operation. And in this case, the camp funds are to match what we're asking for in that grant. Thanks. At Brookdale, we're working with the foundation and the Illinois Clean Energy Foundation on an acquisition grant adjacent to Camp Lakota. That has been submitted. And when that grant is awarded, and we're pretty confident in it, it will include $20,000 that we're requesting from camp to augment about an equal amount we'll be getting from Illinois Clean Energy to do some habitat restoration work on that new parcel. And the reason those move right to the top is Illinois Clean Energy requires that work to be done as part of the grant. So we budget to do that, and that's one of the grant requirements that we have. Thanks. At High Point Conservation Area, we're applying for a grant with NICOR and the foundation, and that will be to do some savanna work and some improvements on prairies up in that conservation area. And the camp request is for $30,000 to augment those funds from NICOR. And we have applied for that, and we're hoping to hear on it soon. This actually shouldn't say High Point. I'm sorry, there's a typo there. It should say Alden Sedgwick. That's what happens when you cut and paste. But this is a grant that we thought we were going to get last year. It had to be submitted by IDNR, and at the last minute, they decided not to submit it, and they submitted it this year instead. So we have several partners here. The IDNR is the main partner. Lake County Forest Preserve and DuPage County Forest Preserve are in on it. And it basically takes federal money from a program they call America the Beautiful, and it allows restoration work to go on IDNR lands that are adjacent to forest preserve lands or conservation district lands. So you'll see in Lake County and DuPage and up here in McHenry County, there is a piece of IDNR land that adjoins forest preserve lands or district lands in this grant project. So the work will be done on their property, and they can subcontract to allow the forest preserve or conservation district to work on their property at the same time. So this one is going to be with you for a few years. We will be able to draw up to $1 million from this in $250,000 increments, so we don't wanna hamper our camp funding by trying to apply for it all at once. It's a year by year. So as we complete $250,000 worth of restoration work at the site, we'll be able to be reimbursed, and then we'll draw another camp fund for the same amount to do the next phase of the work. And it'll probably take us about 3 or 4 years to complete all that work. So again, this is one that we will draw from camp to begin with, but then it will be reimbursed back as the work is completed. So that allows us to keep that camp funding up for the next project. And I believe that that's the last slide. Yep. Any questions?
I have a question. So, restoration work, what do you do?
In all, you mean in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is, in the National Capital Improvement Plan, this is a great question, Pat, that's been asked a lot of times over the years. So we kind of put it down in writing in that National Capital Improvement Plan. And the first part of the plan goes through what's involved in each part of restoration. So if you're working with woods or wetlands or prairies, it goes through the steps that we do in order to do that. So it's a little bit easier to understand. But in a nutshell, it basically involves 3 major factors. So if the area has to have seeding added to it, as in the case of a prairie restoration, if we're going into a former ag field, that'll be the seeding process where we put back the seeds of the original plants that were there. Similarly, if you're doing a project with woods, we'll be putting trees in instead of the seeds for the prairie. If it's covered with brush, then the first part of all of this is removing the brush. So imagine, the analogy I always use is if you're painting a house, it hasn't been painted in a long time, you probably have to scrape it first. So that's what you can think of the brush removal as doing. You're preparing that surface before you actually invest a lot of money in expensive cedar trees. So we'll remove the brush. That could be a process that might take several years. Because I'm sure as you know, from farming and clearing an area, you get rid of it and the stuff comes back up from the roots or from the seeds. So you have to chase it down for a couple of years before you invest in seeding that property. So there's brush removal. Sometimes we'll remove internal fences. If there's an old homestead where we've taken down the original buildings, we'll make sure that's graded out so it can be part of the process. So that's really what we call the structural end of it. And then there's the functional end of it, which is what is the hydrology like? Now, if you're dealing with prairies or woodlands, usually the hydrology is the hydrology. It hasn't been altered. But if an area was a wetland before and it was converted at some point to cropland, which is a fascinating history if you're ever into something like that. That's the biggest civil engineering feat that's ever been accomplished in North America is farm drainage. It's just amazing. But you do have to restore that hydrology so that it will hold water again. So we may have to go through tile removal in some areas, or if we have offsite neighbors, we have to utilize structures in the tiles so that we can allow our neighbors to continue to drain and we don't impact their drainage. So that would be the functional end of it. And then finally, the last part is where we actually put the seeds in. So if you think of it, those are the 3 big steps that we do. And then we manage by doing prescribed fire and looking for outbreaks of plants that we have to get rid of, like thistles and things like that. It's actually a much more complicated process, but that kind of puts it into the shorthand thing.
Yeah. Good. Excellent.
Yeah, and again, it's in the major plans. So if you want to go into more detail, it actually gives you some costs for that as well, what we typically do.
Okay, Ron, you're up. Built-in conditions report.
From Foxglove.
Just a quick report on the condition.
Yeah, number of years ago, I think it was 2015, we bought Camp Algonquin. It had an active camp on it. It was run, for numerous years. I think we leased it out to the YMCA of McHenry County. That's the one I think that they were the last, group that was there. When they, decided to stop, operating the camp down there, we took over. We did a site analysis. We went through the master plan process on it and determined there were 4 structures down there that we probably should keep and, you know, and as a kind of signature structures of, that tell the story of the camp, that was there for 100 years. So, we immediately identified some of the things that needed to happen to these structures to shore them up. We did put a roof on one of them. down there because it was in the worst shape. That's the rec hall that's down there. We did not put a roof on that one at that time. Money got tight. We stopped kind of investing in historic structures. I came to the board and talked to them about 3-4 years ago and said, look, we need to invest in these things or they're gonna become, unrepairable. And so, at the time, the board decided not to do that. Some quick analysis that we've done about this one, we believe that, the Tribune dorm building is, beyond saving at this point. And maybe, or we could put a roof on it, but it has a lot more issues going on because now that water's down inside and whatnot. So, it's
in pretty rough shape.
It is, we toured it, well, yeah, you were.
that was the simple way to say it, right there.
Yeah, bottom line,
Bottom line.
yeah, repair basically.
Yeah.
So, we did not put any money in the budget for it. We had an estimate of, I don't know, 80,000, I can't remember coming off the top of my head. But we did not put it in there because, again, it's staff's opinion that, that's throwing, good money after bad.
And so I do think with that historic roof, this is one, and I appreciate John bringing, staff has been evaluating, monitoring, we're doing our part to share. And so as we have those other structures, if we don't get roofs on other things, just by natural, they will find themselves in this pathway as well. So, we're doing certain things, but if we want to, and that's a larger discussion, if there's a commitment to preserving some of these spaces, then we're gonna.
Well, I think that's what we'll do with the committee, we'll decide that or. Good, thanks, John. All right, 6.3, the first reading of the comprehensive administration policy and procedural manual. Good stuff in there.
Oh, this is fun. I want to say we're.
It's a bestseller.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 11th hour here. Let's see, let me make sure this is all, what's coming on your screen. Oh, it might not be that's some issues on the side. I don't know how to correct that, but so we'll just go with it.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. It's showing differently at home than it is here in the boardroom. So, being that this is a lengthy conversation, I just want to go over a highlight, and I'm going to go through in the most expeditious way possible because of the timings of this. And of course, importance of feedback of reading this. It started out to red line, and then with all the changes and things as we go through, the red line got lost, and that's why it's yellow highlighted to share kind of the focus of what changes were being done. This is our administrative policy procedural manual. It represents, basically all of the areas and chapters that are included of the organization. And then we do have other manuals or policies that the board looks at. The personnel policy manual, which gets reviewed annually and updated. So you'll be seeing more reading towards that before the end of the calendar year. And then we also have our general use ordinance, which basically allows us to police our sites and manage our sites outside. That sets the laws of how we operate. And we're also starting a process to review all of that and update, and we'll be bringing that forward as well. This is important, not only just the regular housekeeping to make sure we're in place, we're in agreement with where we need to be based on legislative changes that occur, how we're doing business, or maybe some challenges that we've seen that we need clarification on. In addition, as we go through that decennial committee process, it's important that we're looking through these items to ensure that we are looking for efficiencies, that we are in compliance. And so that's part of that overall analysis. And so really important that we have this. So to begin here, this is first reading, and we have 8 chapters. In the past, there were some chapters that were grayed out, and we were waiting for those to be brought into the document. And so we have been successful in getting most of those brought over or brought into this. Then we will continue. Then we've got a basis to which to work forward. And the new chapters that have been added for this time, you'll see 6.0 operations planning and public safety. The natural ecosystem in chapter 7 was in place, but the land preservation administration, those were ported over. And then some new suggestions. And then chapter 8.0, our public communications and educational services. Those are new for this reading. Just briefly on the process for those that are new on policies and how the district handles policies such as this is we review existing policies, we identify where changes and clarification, like I said, is needed. We amend those and place those out, and we are where we are tonight at step number 4 for first reading. So that means any feedback, any reviews, we can go ahead and we can tweak those and we can get those ready for discussion and then bring those back to the board for second reading. At the point that we have second reading, then we can move this forward to pass the ordinance that then will make this official, and that will be our document. So those are the steps and here we are. Okay. In your packet there's a summary sheet, and I think the best way for me to do this is just to take you briefly through the summary. I didn't print out everyone the copy of this large dissertation here. And so if you feel at any point that I need to go forward, please let me know. The first one, there's 2 areas in general overview, which is the values in our sustainability vision.
Yeah.
The values, what we've added there is just our diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that we've added, which we feel it's important that it's there. And then we also shared a sustainability vision.
6.38, got it.
Sustainability vision, and basically this just shares what the district is doing to ensure environmental sustainability, the practices that we have and some actions that we've taken. So for a conservation agency, we felt it was important to map that out. The second chapter is on governance, and we've added on required training, what is required for newly appointed trustees. That's required by statutes. That's a legislative change just to make sure that's there. And of course, that is your OMA training, your sexual harassment training. Those are things that are required. We've also then clarified under chapter 2.0205, the sexual harassment and unlawful discrimination. And again, this is a required statute for trustees, elected officials, and employees. Under the types of board of trustees meetings, we added a new category for gatherings, similar to what we did with the Vice in the county, just to clarify that that is a social gathering with no action taken. And then on remote participation, recently the legislature just added another provision so that you can be remote should the board, and it's in our policy and it's approved, should you need to remote in under unexpected childcare obligations as allowed. So again, we're adding that, and once the board adopts that, that becomes a provision to take action on. We also added the decennial committee on local government efficiencies as required by law, and that's something not only once we get through this year, that'll be required every 10 years. And so the policy addresses that, so we don't forget that that's something that we need to be doing and how that process all works. The ordinance we clarified, we have resolutions and ordinances on the ordinance. So the way it was reared, it needed clarification on the types of actions towards ordinances that require a 2-reading process. So our policies does require first reading, second reading, but let's say an ordinance for land acquisition or, some other type of financial expenditure. No, we could do that with a 1 reading immediately onto the board to take action on that. Our budgetary process, in essence, that's kind of like a multi-step ordinance. You do the tentative budget and then you do the final budget. But that's just to clarify for that purpose. We've added this section for the foundation to acknowledge that they're our partner and to describe their relationship with the district. And then on chapter 3, our housing policy, and I don't have it here, it's under, sorry, I missed a slide. We've mapped, and next month you're going to get a presentation on our housing. Thank you, Trustee Zimmerman, for working with staff, our Director of Operations Plan and Public Safety, and the Director of Administration and Finance, both met to review our current housing process. And this just maps, we no longer have a housing committee. It just reduces the grievance process to the Director of Operations, then to myself, and cleans up the language in the current policy.
On that section was 3.03.01 in that housing agreement. I think it was for employees who are taking residence in one of their properties.
Yes.
It was confusing. It talked about the agreements were month to month, and then it talked about ending on March 31st. So I didn't quite understand. Is it month to month?
It's considered legally as a month-to-month lease, so that's the notification given to cancel the lease arrangement. But we do agree when we sign up that the intent is the agreement will last for a year.
Okay.
And then we bring those forward to the board. You'll see those before they go into effect. And then you get all the employees that are having housing. Again, it's not housing based on employment. It's just we have housing availability in buildings, and it's evolved over the years of the purpose of those housings. But currently, and you'll hear more about, you know, the investments that the district makes and what point, you know, we're no longer investing in those properties because it crosses that tipping point where it's not wise for the district to be. But thank you. So that's the month to month. That's our exit clause on what we can. Okay. Under chapter 4, under general management, the Smoke-Free Illinois Act, they've added, and this was just approved, the electronic cigarettes is no longer permitted in public facilities, so we had to identify that. Under recreational activities supported, on this one, we clarify, this is if I can follow along here on my book. Here, so I can point these out. So what we've done here is we've added under our tertiary activities, disc golf. Disc golf is a Pro Triple R, so since we kept that as part of the activity, we've left that specified here and made sure that was added. And then under prohibited recreational criteria, we clarified, so not only did we have sports fields, but we've also added courts and golf courses is something to which we don't have on conservation district property, as well as changing treasure hunting, because that may have been a little bit more confusing for the reader, to metal detection and magnet fishing as a prohibited activity. And then the response to public notices, this was in place. This one's just ported though over to the policy, and I think the board has seen where we've had a thread of a notice that's given to provide, you know, if we have concern of how it's going to impact the district's land holdings. This is the administrative procedure and process that we follow for communicating with the particular petitioner or the community, the village, county, etc. And so this has not changed. This is our response. The only thing that's clarified is what we would identify as an official response or an unofficial response. So that maps that. And then just a listing of professional affiliations, just adding a few others to clarify. We do have active involvement either through membership or staff engagement. So we've included IPRA now that they have a Forest Preserve and Conservation district section, as well as the Illinois Parks Law and Enforcement Association with our police department. Okay, under finance and administration, most of this is just cleanup, but I do want to highlight the particular area. So you can read through these, just the clarification of unassigned fund balances through our framework plan of sustaining the dream. The board agreed under certain conditions that we would reduce what was a 25% to that 16.6% of the annual operating expenses. So now that's captured in here of when that is allowed. We've also added a new policy with the work that we've been doing with our foundation and the ability to provide naming opportunities. So we don't name our conservation sites, you know, those have all been done. There's another policy related to site naming under geographical features, natural areas, that would be more not after names of people. But this would allow us, if we were to receive donations through the foundation, to say we want to name a building, or would we want to name a shelter, or would we want to name a trail within a conservation area. This would allow us to accept funds under certain conditions and to bring that back through what would be allowable at my ability as the director, and then what would need to come forward to the board of trustees. And we put that threshold at that $30,000 level. I mean, so if it's a significant gift, obviously the board's going to be involved with that and to make sure for those naming opportunities. Clean up on the sponsorship and advertising policy that was existing, and just showing with the MOU with the foundation. We have the foundation now being the party that secures our sponsorship, and then they do, or we may do fulfillment through marketing and advertising, but that just identifies the foundation's role in that place. And then fixed assets, just the capitalization, vehicles were reduced from greater than 1,000 to greater than 500. So that was just how the auditors and how we're capturing that for tracking and inventory. The biggest change, I think, in the financial section, and basically our assessment of efficiencies as well as with inflation. And one of the areas that was brought forward was the threshold, to which who at what level do they need the appropriate authorizations to make purchases? And we have not increased this in some time. In addition, state law increased the bidding threshold quite some time ago to 30,000, and we've been at 25,000. So that means that is an extra layer of work and time and effort for staff, not necessarily efficiencies. They still have to get quotes, but to put it out for bid. So what is proposed here under purchasing limits to begin is that we've just moved, the under $200 for full-time employees would have the opportunity to do so. The supervisor or manager's designee would have up to 1,000 from that level where they have to sign off. A manager's signature is needed. They're allowed to go up to 5,000. A manager and a director's signature is needed to take it to 7,500. Then Andy's tipped in. He needs to sign everything from that 7,501 to the 15,000. It's my desk. I'm required to sign off anything that's from 15,001 to $29,999, and then being that bidding threshold at 30,000. That's what comes in front of the board, and we're going out to bid or to get it. Okay, so that just is updated. The same thing with signing of contracts under the statute. No one has the authority to execute a contract unless given specifically explicit direction by the board. So this maps that out, and we followed the same thresholds that we had in our purchasing threshold. So who gets to sign it? We did change, though, a modification is to allow our managers to be able to execute a contract for up to 5,000. That was in their purview, but we did put a caveat that language that they are familiar with what's required. They can't extend the district and bind us into something that would not be appropriate. So it may, sometimes the contract may not be for a lot of dollars, but if you don't read the contract language, it may cost you a whole lot more if you're not up on the insurance and risk management and all those things. So we did put that in there so that they are connecting with their director, should that be necessary. But if we're using standard agreements where council has signed off and this is just a matter of putting in the date and the amount, then we're good with them being able to execute that. And then again, it goes all the way up to who's required to execute any contracts to bind the district for the work following our purchasing. Any questions? Just in general, is the board, are you comfortable with those recommended adjustments on
Yeah, makes sense.
Make one recommendation on the new proposed limits. Instead of making it 5,000 and 5,001, you technically have a dollar gap.
Right.
That would equal then a grade or two.
Good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, let's move into chapter 6 for operations plan and public safety. This is a new area and this was in gray, but staff did a great job to kind of pull these in place. And so this is just a placeholder. Many of these are more of clarification procedures, right? Just to more so than a policy. A lot of these fall within procedures. But this you can review. It just kind of maps out how in general our police, they have their own standard operating procedures that they work through. And of course, being accredited now, very specific guidelines that they're operating under. Too much to pull into this document. The buildings condition report, building demolition, just how we assess buildings. You heard tonight about some of the condition assessments that are being done. Our site master planning process is something that it's not a new policy. That one was on the books. We just have not done any updated really site master procedures. So we just left that as is. The only modifications that we made is we took away Citizens Advisory Committee because we do not have that any longer. But we did change that to review of key stakeholders and then up to 2 trustees, which would be allowed under the Open Meetings Act to be part of that planning process.
Elizabeth, is there, I don't know, is there just a typo there? I don't know.
On which one? On that, it's master, yes. Master. There's a missing. Yeah. we've been doing a lot of workshop type with two trustees, with staff, so that seems to have been effective with that. And then the others, you can see they're just opening and closing of sites, hours of operation, closing of sites for safety, public shelters, campsite use, the public reservation process that we have, the internal reservation process for staff, public use, loss of rights that traces back to our general use ordinance. We talked about the annual site assessment, how we maintain our trails, mowing, snow removal, grooming of trails for those types of activities. Parking lots, restrooms, how regular park inspections, you know, the privies and how that's handled. Landscaping, landscaping around buildings, our packing, pack out with trash and recycling. Pet waste disposal, boundary fencing, fleet vehicles, our power, machinery and equipment. And then an operations manual, which that is something to which the team has, but they're gonna work towards formalizing that, which will have more details than what's here in this manual, which I don't think it needs to be in this one. And then our key management system and alarm. So I think anybody who reads this as a staff member, as a board member, can see these are the types of things and how we at a very high level are managing those areas. As I said, most of these are not, when I say policy, but they're guiding procedures. All right, the next chapter under 7.0 is land preservation administration, natural ecosystem management. And here we've got land protection procedures, just the formalization of how transactions are brought forward to the board. And so that just shares what we're, again, per our statute, what we are supposed to be doing, but how the board of trustees is involved with that. That's not something that's a permanence. And that's not something that staff does unilaterally or has the ability to bind. It just clarifies that's a board action. And that the district under just compensation, that we're ensuring that interest, that we're fair and in those transactions, and that whoever we're purchasing is justly compensated for such a transaction. We also have used the installment purchase on acquisitions, and so we are allowed to do that by statute. So that just clarifies that process, that it is up to 10 years that we can enter into nothing greater. Then the dedication of state nature preserves, land and water reserves. This is something for statute that we do and we are supposed to be doing. And this just provides the different options. And again, there is a guiding document on that. And buildings, we have a statement here just that when we are acquiring land, we're striving to acquire structures, acquire land that does not have structures, but there may be situations where there are structures. They may have a cultural significance, or there may be no way for the district to acquire the property if it doesn't have structures in it. So we left our way the ability to navigate that, but the intent is to strive to be free of that liability. And then another one that we had, and we'll probably have more discussion, is commercial solar. We had a working group at one time that looked at the district's role on solar. And we talked a little bit tonight about solar. And after looking at statute, even discussion with legal counsel, probably under our statute, the lands are supposed to be open and preserved for their natural state. And so having solar arrays or commercial solar to serve another need, probably, not probably, it's at least staff's opinion is it's not mission focused. Doesn't mean that we couldn't do solar for our parking lot to charge, our gates or to a building that we have that we need to do better with energy and efficiency. Absolutely. But to put it into the grid for the whole public, for land that was protected for our natural states. So that's our recommendation, is that we have a policy statement that this is just to address it and put it to rest, but that's something we do not do.
Here. And I'm glad that you call them facilities and not farms, because they're not agricultural. They're not farms.
So that's our recommendation on for our land preservation administration. And then lastly, the new chapter on public communications and educational services. Many of these are just mapping things that we already have. Our branding, we already had our branding standards. This now incorporates so everybody understands across the organization how to use our logo, when it's appropriate to what way, colors, etc. So that's all mapped. It identifies our quarterly landscapes as our primary print collateral piece that the district does to communicate and put our programs out. It explains our commitment to, the role in communicating through digital media, and our social media platforms to which we use. The importance of needs assessments to, interact with the public, engage, how we're doing, and the role that we have to do that every 3 to 5 years. Our dashboard performance metrics, you heard about some of those, but just that is how we measure program successes, whether it be through attendance, visitation, efficiencies, and overall quality management. Customer service philosophy, again, just how we approach customer service excellence, our registration process through our registration system, and the timeline for that, our transactional fees that we can collect fees for programs, so that identifies what types of programs we look to fee assessment, cancellations and refunds, the philosophy of our educational services team, so that's mapped out, as well as our role with outreach to schools and scout groups, and our loaning of equipment that we have in our library to be viewed and used, and then the types of programs and events that are produced by our educational services. And again, so many of them are policies that just maps out what they do. And that was a lot for you, but that's where we are with first reading. So I'm gonna stop talking. Was there anything in the review? We talked about the finances, the big one. There were some other things, gender pronouns, titles, facilities mapped, but that's just housekeeping. So if there's anything that you need that you come up between now and when we bring this forward, please let me know. If you see and again, great suggestion, Ray, on the threshold there, we'll make that correction. We'll bring it back for second reading if that's what it was.
Okay, thanks, good.
Thank you.
Okay, save your voice, but move on to you, 7.0, executive director's report,
Okay, let's see here. What did I know?
Queen Anne, bioreactor.
Queen Anne bioreactor. Ed, you want to have anything here? Just an update on the Queen Anne? Yeah.
Basically, just a quick summary of what we're doing with it.
This was a partnership on a grant project of the Farm Bureau that we did a couple of years ago. We built a bioreactor, which is actually a wood chip structure that tile water goes through and removes nutrients from it before it goes into the receiving stream. We worked with the Farm Bureau to have a couple of public programs there that I think went pretty well. We've also organized a volunteer corps who monitored it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on the time of the year. Sent those results, the water results, over to the U of I to be analyzed, and indeed it does work. It does remove nutrients from the tile water. The U of I is no longer willing to do the analysis of the water to kind of finish with their end of it. We looked into whether the district could afford to do it. The closest reasonable place we found was in Lake County. But between the cost of the analysis and needing to send a staff person there every week to drop off those samples, we think that probably can end our formal relationship on that. The Farm Bureau is ending theirs as well. We can monitor it periodically through the year, so we do have some sample points that go through the year. But it was a good project, and I think it worked out well, but that's kind of where our staff recommendation is at this point. We think we're probably not gonna learn a lot more from doing more samples. There's been enough samples that you can really see that it works.
So how long has it been there?
Gosh, it has to be at least 2, maybe 3 years. So I know we've had 2 programs. Yeah, you've been, I think.
Yeah, I've been to them. I think the next closer to 4 years.
Yeah, it could be. Well, time flies.
I know. So, yeah, no, it worked out well.
Is that on Queen Anne Road?
It is.
Yeah. And we have done a summary up. I haven't had a chance to put it into package form yet. So if anybody wants a written summary of what we did over the last few years, then we can provide that as well.
I got one comment. It doesn't eventually, the wood chips gotta be replaced.
That's the deal. You have to dig them out and replace them. So it's a longer term, short term solution.
Right. Every 5 to 8 years they have to dig them out.
And in order to really make a difference, you'd have to have hundreds of them everywhere.
Yeah.
To do that, but in certain situations, it's probably the right bet.
Yeah. No, it was good. Alrighty, thank you. Now we'll go to Find Your Wild.
Yeah, Caitlin, I don't know if you're on, but I just want to give a shout out. The marketing team did a phenomenal job Wendy, Caitlin, Maddie, who went to Woodstock now, I saw her today. But also Sarah, who's joined our team now. Caitlin, you did a great report. It does highlight the stats. I don't know if she's still on.
Pictures. I think in your weekly.
Yeah, you saw that. So the report's here. I just, again, it's great. It was very effective. It reached a lot of people and they did a great job. They will be speaking this at the conference and.
It was a very popular program and it worked out well.
Yeah, they did a great job with that. The only other few things that I have, this weekend, we have Hike with Mike out at the Pleasant Valley Conservation Area. So that will be out there early morning. I'll send
It's
that
on
out.
Saturday.
It's Saturday morning. I believe we start at 9 AM on the hike. And we also then have the Great Outdoor Beer Trail, which is sold out. And that will take place on Saturday as well. I want to thank President Dom and for those that joined, we did a team with the Environmental Defenders and the McHenry County Conservation Foundation and the district at Soulful Prairie a week ago and to raise funds for our cause and thank you letters have gone out. It was nice for them to host us and to be able, it's a nice event and beautiful property. And I think we reached some people that aren't necessarily familiar with us.
Most of them were from out of town, from
Yeah.
sort of city, so, yeah.
But that was a nice event. Today I did also have the opportunity to spend a little bit more time with their new director at the Environmental Defenders and just to get to know Erin Kennedy. She has taken the helm and Environmental Defenders is a great partner and advocate for us. So it was great to sit down and kind of learn a little bit more about their goals ahead and how they may be of assistance to us as we go forward. And I was sharing busy day with meetings. So when I was in the square, we are going to be featuring with Hackmatack on Monday with some of our legislators locally and stop by to visit Senator Wilcox and have a conversation. He was busy and he said, well, could you be my proxy? Because I got to stay at the shop. So we should go and sit at the State of the City of Woodstock. So I sat at the City of Woodstock, State of the City. Wonderful. They're doing some really ambitious things there. Great work, great projects. They recently asked the district to do a letter of support. They're going to be doing a trail plan to connect. Trails are really important to connect up to our Ridgefield Trace, as well as some of the parks. And they're seeing too, their parks in the city of Woodstock being very important, just like we're seeing how they rank with the community. And then we went this afternoon over to the public meeting. There's one tonight too on the passenger rail from Chicago to Rockford. And we had a special meeting in our request that we talked about and Gabe and Ed were there to hear and get some questions that the district had answered. So we're going to stay engaged with that. They did answer some questions again this afternoon. We're going to be monitoring that, as you know, because we have that ownership all the way from one county side all the way down to the other line. And so we are a key stakeholder. They did also say today they don't have to at this point follow the federal NEPA process, and that is what they have to do for sensitivity of environmental issues. But they intend to follow the NEPA process if the project moves forward. And that was good for us because that's important. But also in the event that the project needs federal funding, they have to have that. So that was one of the, I think, the piece.
And key that we all reminded them, this is private property adjoining the track. This isn't a lease that the district has. We own it, to be simple. And I think that they got that message.
Right.
Good.
And they will be looking primarily, just an update too. They know that it's not, and the messaging was clear. This is not Metra. This is not, although the rail from like Big Timber to Chicago is Metra, then it transfers over to the Union Pacific as they move forward, and then it's the Canadian National and Kansas City Railway that as they move out towards Rockford. But it's a passenger rail 2 times a day, 2 trains in the morning going like this.
79 mile an hour.
So, yeah, a fast rail. And, the other piece is they will need to reinforce their track. They're not sure, they will need to make modifications and evaluate through the ICC any trail crossing, to ensure safe crossing that goes along the way. And then they will also, need siding, and it was 10,000 feet of a siding. I don't know how many sidings they're going to need along it. And they, Lee said today that of the two, one would be closer to Marengo, and then the other would be in towards Belvedere, somewhere in there. So, for the district, what does that mean? Yet to know, but that's, an area. So again, that's,
And we learned today that there will be complete tie-in rail replacement and grading.
It would have to be. Use.
What entity is pushing this? I know it's federal.
Yeah, where is it coming from?
Pritzker.
governor, and it started, I took some pictures here, it's a process of visioning, started a while ago, let's see here, they had
Like 1998.
Oh, really?
They met with us, Farm Bureau, and the county board, and they said it's never gonna happen. They told us, cause it's a whole separate rail.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a new line.
Yeah, and
That was, Bueller was there and.
That was quite a number of years ago.
Brian Sang,
Yeah, right.
was there and says it's never gonna happen.
Yeah, 2020.
Well, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen now either, so.
Yeah, they're still on, I mean, they expect it all to be done, construction between 2025 and 2027. 2027,
Whoa, that's pretty
trains
ambitious.
moving.
That's pretty
on the radio,
ambitious.
2027.
And the project as far as costs,
274 million.
274 million,
That's what it is.
yeah, it's
Yeah. It's crazy.
and there's a lot of, as I said, they're working with the different municipalities, the Union Station, is where the train will head, so they're working a lot of IGAs that they have to get in place between now and then for all of this to happen. Yeah, IDOT is the project manager, it's IDOT who's managing the project.
Oh,
When we had the initial meeting, there was a lot of surprise among units of government. That this was really the first day and had an opportunity to hear anything of it. So, the good thing, Elizabeth worked with the county and let me together.
yeah, good.
I appreciate it, we will share our resources and, as far as, you know, conservation areas of importance for protection, and again, I think it's just a matter of, it's an opportunity to find the best placement, and I think all can be achieved. Everybody's willing to work together,
Yeah, if we need it or not. Yeah. Good.
so that's all I have.
Okay, we'll move on. Public comments number 2. So, anybody out there?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 2C5, lease purchase of real estate, and 2C21, review of closed session minutes of the Open Meetings Act.
There a second?
Second.
Maybe a second, and moved and seconded, so we go roll call.
Vice President Everard,
Yes.
Treasurer Gaten,
Yes.
Trustee Zimmerman,
Yes.
Trustee Wazor,
Yeah.
Secretary Fritz,
Yeah.
and President Dom.
Yes.